I am Kennedy, 30 years old, and last Tuesday my parents told me the greatest gift I could give my sister Abigail for her wedding was to disappear from our family forever. I sat across from them at our favorite restaurant, their faces cold as stone while delivering this news. My heart shattered, but I refused to cry. Instead, I nodded, stood up with quiet dignity, and walked away. No begging, no sheen, just silence. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments, hit like and subscribe to see what happened when I sold our apartment and froze our joint account the very next day. Growing up in Meadowbrook, a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Connecticut, I always felt something was off about my place in our family. Our house looked perfect from the outside: 4 bedrooms, neatly trimmed lawn, and a tire swing that my father Thomas hung from the oak tree when I was 7. But inside those walls, the difference in how my parents treated me versus my sister Abigail, younger by 2 years, started as subtle ripples that eventually grew into undeniable waves. When Abigail earned a B+ on her math test, my parents would take her for ice cream to celebrate. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, they would nod and say, "That is what we expect from you, Kennedy." When Abigail made the junior varsity volleyball team, they attended every game, cheering loudly from the bleachers. When I was selected for the national science competition in high school, they claimed they were too busy to make the 3-hour drive. Despite this, I always worked hard to earn their approval. I graduated top of my class in computer science at Northeastern University, while working part-time to cover expenses. My parents deemed unnecessary for my education. After college, I secured a position as a software engineer at Axiom Technologies, one of the most competitive firms in Boston. Within 5 years, I had been promoted twice and saved enough for a down payment on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. That apartment became my first major mistake in a series of attempts to connect with my family. My parents suggested they become co-owners to help me establish credit despite my already excellent credit score. Wanting their involvement in my life, I agreed. Similarly, I established a joint family emergency account to which I contributed 70% of the funds. My parents and Abigail had access ostensibly for family emergencies, though I noticed occasional withdrawals for Abigail's shopping trips and vacations that were never discussed. 2 years ago, at a work conference in Denver, I met Derek. Tall, with kind brown eyes and a quick laugh, he worked for a partner company and asked thoughtful questions during my presentation on security protocols. We exchanged business cards, began a long-distance relationship that evolved into something serious when he transferred to the Boston office 6 months later. Derek was the first person who truly saw the dynamic with my family. "Kennedy," he said, "one night after a particularly difficult Sunday dinner at my parents' house, you realize it is not normal for your mother to critique everything from your career choice to your hairstyle while praising Abigail for ordering dessert correctly right." I had laughed it off, but his observation settled uncomfortably in my mind. When Abigail called to announce her engagement to Jason, a pharmaceutical sales representative she had been dating for 11 months, I was genuinely happy for her. Perhaps this milestone would finally bring our family closer. I immediately offered to help with wedding preparations, hoping this shared project might bridge the distance between us. For weeks, I heard nothing about wedding plans until my mother, Marion, called to invite me to dinner to discuss the wedding. My heart soared. Finally, an invitation to participate in something important to our family. I spent hours shopping for a new outfit for the dinner, eventually selecting a modest navy blue dress that I thought would meet with my mother's approval. Not too flashy, not too casual. I researched thoughtful wedding gift ideas to present during dinner. Perhaps I could contribute to their honeymoon fund or help pay for the wedding photographer. I even considered offering my apartment for Abigail's bridal shower, mentally rearranging furniture to accommodate guests. The evening of the dinner, I called Derek from my car. "I think this might be a turning point," I told him, unable to keep the hope from my voice. Mom sounded almost friendly on the phone. "Just remember, you are amazing regardless of how they treat you," Derek replied, his voice warm with concern. "Call me after, okay?" I arrived at Castellano's, my parents' favorite Italian restaurant, 5 minutes early. Through the window, I could see them already seated, heads bent together in conversation. I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and walked in with a bright smile and renewed optimism. "Kennedy," my mother acknowledged as I approached their table. No hug, no warm greeting. My father Thomas barely looked up from the menu, offering only a brief nod. I swallowed my disappointment and sat down across from them, smoothing my napkin over my lap. "You look nice," my mother said, though her tone suggested surprise rather than admiration. "That shade of blue is not terrible on you." "Thank you," I replied, clinging to the small compliment. "I bought it special for tonight." The waiter came for our drink orders. My parents both ordered their usual Chianti. I asked for sparkling water with lime. Still, on that health kick, my father asked his first direct comment to me. "Abigail says wine is actually good for your heart." I smiled tightly, just not in the mood for alcohol tonight. Small talk filled the next 20 minutes. They asked perfunctory questions about my work, though their eyes glazed over when I mentioned my recent project, managing a team developing security software. The conversation drifted to the unusually warm spring weather, the restaurant's new menu items, and their neighbors' landscaping choices. Finally, as our entrees arrived, I brought up the topic I had been waiting to discuss. "So about Abigail's wedding," I began, my voice bright with enthusiasm. "I would love to help with the preparations. I could assist with addressing invitations or venue research or whatever you need." My mother set down her fork. My father cleared his throat, exchanging a look with her that sent ice through my veins. The moment stretched into uncomfortable silence. "Actually, Kennedy," my mother finally said, adjusting her pearl necklace, "that is what we wanted to discuss with you." My father took a large sip of wine before speaking. "We think your gift to your sister should be your absence." I blinked rapidly, certain I had misheard. "I am sorry, what?" "Abigail is very sensitive right now," my mother explained, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she often used when speaking to me. "Planning a wedding is stressful, and she deserves her perfect day without any complications." "Complications?" I repeated, my food forgotten. "What complications would I cause?" My father sighed heavily as if I was being deliberately obtuse. "Kennedy, you know how you are. You always find a way to cause drama." "Drama? When have I ever caused drama at family events?" I asked, genuinely confused. My mother sniffed disapprovingly. "Do you remember Thanksgiving 3 years ago?" I searched my memory. "When I brought the homemade cranberry sauce." "When you showed up in that attention-seeking red dress," she corrected. Everyone was talking about it instead of Abigail's promotion announcement. I remembered the dress, a modest A-line I had purchased, specifically because the sales associate assured me it was appropriate for family dinner. "I had no idea Abigail was going to announce a promotion," I said quietly. "And last Christmas," my father continued, "when you had to mention your bonus at work. You asked about my job," I pointed out, struggling to keep my voice level. "I was answering your question." It came across as showing off, my mother said. Abigail had just mentioned she was hoping for a raise next year. The accusations continued. Apparently, my career success made Abigail feel inadequate. My apartment purchase overshadowed her moving into a new rental. Even my relationship with Derek was problematic, because Abigail had introduced me to another man months before I met Derek, and my rejection of her matchmaking efforts had hurt her feelings. "We think my father concluded that you are jealous of your sister's happiness and might try to steal attention during her wedding." I sat perfectly still, feeling as though I had stepped into an alternate reality. The restaurant continued around us, waiters taking orders, couples laughing, glasses clinking. Meanwhile, my parents had just suggested I was so toxic that I should remove myself from the most significant family event in years. "I see," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "If that is how you both feel and how Abigail feels, I will respect that decision." My mother looked almost disappointed by my calm response. Perhaps she had expected tears or arguments that would confirm their narrative about my dramatic tendencies. "The bill is taken care of," my father said dismissively. "We will let Abigail know you have agreed to give her this gift." I stood up, legs somehow supporting me. "Thank you for dinner," I said automatically, years of enforced politeness taking over. I walked out of the restaurant with my head high, waited until I was in my car before the tears came. The drive home passed in a blur. I called Derek, my voice breaking, as I recounted the conversation. His outrage on my behalf was both comforting and validating. "That is absolutely insane," he said. "They cannot be serious. Did Abigail actually ask for this?" "I do not know," I realized. "They spoke for her, but I never heard it directly from her." You should talk to her, Derek suggested. Maybe your parents are misrepresenting her wishes. I wanted to believe that. Despite our complicated relationship, Abigail and I had occasional moments of genuine sisterhood. Surely she would not want me excluded from her wedding entirely. That night, I barely slept, replaying years of subtle rejections and sudden withdrawals of affection. The pattern was clear now, but seeing it laid bare did not make it easier to accept. By morning, I had resolved to speak directly with Abigail, rather than accepting my parents' version of events. The next morning, I called Abigail during my break at work. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed, rehearsing what to say. After 4 rings, she answered, her voice immediately guarded. Kennedy, is everything okay? I am kind of busy with wedding stuff. Hi, Abigail, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I just wanted to talk to you about something important. Do you have a few minutes? She sighed audibly. I guess. But I have a cake tasting in 30 minutes. I had dinner with Mom and Dad last night, I began. They told me some things about the wedding that I wanted to discuss directly with you. Oh, she said, her voice dropping. They told you. Yes, but I wanted to hear from you. Do you really want me to not attend your wedding? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Abigail spoke, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Look, Kennedy, it is not that I do not want you there exactly. I would feel more relaxed if you were not. The confirmation hit harder than I expected, despite being prepared for it. Can you help me understand why? Have I done something to upset you? Another long pause. You always make everything about you, Kennedy. Even now, you are making my wedding about your feelings. I am not trying to do that, I said carefully. I just want to understand. Fine. You want honesty. I have spent my entire life in your shadow. My perfect older sister, with her perfect grades, and perfect job, and perfect apartment, and perfect boyfriend. Do you know what that feels like? I was genuinely confused. Abigail, Mom and Dad have always favored you. They attend all your events, celebrate all your achievements. They barely acknowledge mine. She laughed, a harsh sound unlike her usual giggle. Is that what you think? They only push you because they know you can succeed. They coddle me because they think I cannot handle pressure. Do you know how that feels? That is not true, I protested. They praise everything you do. To your face, maybe. Behind closed doors, it is always, why cannot you be more like Kennedy? Kennedy would have handled this differently. Kennedy never needed this much help. This version of our family dynamic was so contrary to my experience that I struggled to process it. Abigail, I had no idea you felt this way. Of course you did not. You were too busy being perfect. Her voice turned bitter. Remember prom, when Jake Peterson asked me to be his date, then spent the whole night talking to you. He was asking me about college applications, I said, recalling the awkward conversation with Abigail's date. I tried to redirect him back to you. After you flirted with him for an hour? I never flirted with him, I protested. And my college graduation. You just had to announce your promotion that weekend. Mom asked about work during dinner. I answered honestly. I did not make an announcement. I heard muffled voices on her end then. Abigail said, Jason wants to talk to you. Before I could object, her fiancé's voice came through the phone. Kennedy, this is Jason. I think you need to back off. Excuse me, I said, taken aback by his hostile tone. I know all about you, he continued. Abigail has told me everything about your issues. How you always try to one-up her. How you create drama in the family. How you have been jealous of her since childhood. That is not true, I said, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. Look, I am just looking out for my future wife. She deserves a stress-free wedding day, and from what I understand, you are a significant source of stress in her life. So, maybe just respect her wishes for once, instead of making everything about you. The call ended abruptly. I sat at my desk, stunned by the conversation. The accusations were so far from my reality that it felt like they were talking about someone else entirely. Had I been misinterpreting our family dynamic my entire life? Or had Abigail constructed a narrative where she was the victim of my success rather than the favored child? I needed perspective from someone else who knew our family. I called my cousin Grace, who had grown up nearby and spent many holidays with us. Kennedy. Grace sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything okay? I am not sure, I admitted. I need to ask you something honest about our family. Okay. She sounded hesitant. How do you see the dynamic between me, Abigail, and my parents? From an outside perspective? Grace was quiet for a moment. That is a complicated question. Please, I need to know the truth. She sighed. Honestly, everyone in the extended family has always seen how your parents favor Abigail. It is pretty obvious. But what? But there has also been this narrative about you being difficult or causing problems. Whenever you are not invited to something, your parents tell everyone you refuse to come or that you were too busy with work. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, not invited to something? Grace's discomfort was palpable even through the phone. Kennedy, there have been several family gatherings you were not at. Your parents always said you chose not to come. What gatherings? I demanded. Cousin Michael's graduation party last summer, Aunt Patty's 60th birthday, the family reunion at Lake George 2 years ago. She paused. And Abigail's engagement party in January. Engagement party, I repeated. There was an engagement party. You did not know. Grace sounded genuinely shocked. It was at your parents' house, about 40 people. They said you were invited but had a work conflict. After ending the call with Grace, I sat in stunned silence. Then, with shaking hands, I opened social media and began searching family members' profiles. There they were, evidence of all the events I had supposedly declined to attend. Photos of smiling family members at gatherings I had never known about. Abigail's engagement party with a banner reading "She said yes," my parents flanking her beaming with pride. I kept scrolling and found more. A bridal shower from just 2 weeks ago. My mother, aunts, and female cousins surrounding Abigail as she opened gifts. Another photo of my mother giving a toast glass raised. I had not received an invitation or even known it occurred. Then I discovered a wedding planning group chat that included extended family members, friends, and even some of my friends who knew both me and Abigail. Everyone was involved in the planning except me. Worse, I found messages where Abigail claimed I had refused to help with wedding preparations when asked. Messages where my mother explained my jealousy issues to sympathetic relatives. Messages where they discussed how to handle my inevitable drama at the wedding before deciding it was better to ask me not to attend. The hurt that had been building since the restaurant conversation transformed into something hotter and sharper: anger. Not the explosive kind that confirms their narrative about my dramatic nature, but a cold, clarifying anger that cut through years of gaslighting and manipulation. I had spent my entire life trying to earn love that was never going to be given. Trying to understand what I had done wrong when the only wrong thing was expecting to be treated as an equal member of the family. The realization was both devastating and strangely freeing. I decided to confront my parents one last time. Not to change their minds about the wedding that was clearly never going to happen, but to speak my truth before closing this chapter of my life. I gathered screenshots of the events I had been excluded from, printed emails showing my consistent attempts to be involved in family functions, and prepared to face them with evidence rather than emotions. The following evening, I drove to my parents' colonial-style house, the same house where I had grown up but never quite felt at home. The familiar pathway lined with hydrangeas that my mother meticulously maintained. The porch swing where Abigail and I had sometimes shared secrets on summer evenings before the distance between us grew too wide. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, already feeling like a visitor rather than family. My mother opened the door, her surprise quickly shifting to annoyance. "Kennedy, we were just sitting down to dinner. You should have called." "This will not take long," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to speak with you and Dad." She hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly. I followed her to the dining room where my father sat at the head of the table cutting into a steak. He glanced up, his expression darkening when he saw me. "What is this about?" he asked. "We already discussed the wedding situation." "Yes, we did," I agreed, remaining standing, though my mother had taken her seat. "But there are some things I need to clarify before I respect your wishes and remove myself from the family." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. There is no need for dramatics, Kennedy. I placed my folder on the table and removed the first set of printed screenshots. I spoke with Abigail yesterday. And with Cousin Grace. I also did some research of my own. I laid out the photos of family events I had never been invited to, including Abigail's engagement party and bridal shower. I was told I refused to attend these events, but the truth is, I never knew they were happening. My father barely glanced at the evidence. If you had shown more interest in family matters, you would have known. How could I show interest in events I did not know were occurring? I asked calmly. No one called me, texted me, or sent an invitation. We assumed you would be too busy with your important career, my mother said dismissively. You always make it clear your work comes first. I pulled out emails I had sent them over the past 2 years, all showing my attempts to schedule family dinners, suggest outings, and stay connected. Many had gone unanswered. I have consistently tried to be part of this family, I said. You have consistently excluded me. And now I find out you have been telling the entire extended family that I am the one pulling away. My father pushed back from the table slightly. Kennedy, you have always had a flair for creating conflict. This is exactly why Abigail does not want you at her wedding. What did I ever do to deserve this treatment? I asked, my composure finally beginning to crack. Please just tell me what I did wrong. My parents exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Something shifted in my mother's expression, a hardness, giving way to something almost like relief, as if she had been waiting for this confrontation. You were never supposed to be born anyway, she said, the words falling like stones into the quiet room. The statement hung between us, so unexpected and brutal that for a moment I could not breathe. My father did not contradict her or soften the blow. He simply took a sip of his water, eyes averted. What I finally managed to whisper. We only wanted one child, my father explained, his tone matter of fact. Abigail was planned. You were not. We had our life mapped out, my mother continued. One child was what we could afford, what we had prepared for. Then my birth control failed, and there you were. You were an accident we dealt with, my father added. The clinical way they described my existence made the room spin around me. Why did you not give me up for adoption if you did not want me? I asked, my voice small. Appearances, my mother replied. What would people think? We had a good reputation in the community, a good marriage. We could not just give away a child without questions being asked. So instead you kept me and made sure I knew every day that I was unwanted. I said, understanding flooding through me. All those years of subtle rejection suddenly made perfect sense. We provided for you, my father said defensively. You had food, shelter, education, but never love, I finished for him. Never acceptance, never belonging. You always demanded too much attention, my mother said. Always achieving, always excelling, always needing acknowledgement. Abigail was easier. She did not need constant validation. I was a child seeking my parents' approval, I corrected her. That is normal. What is not normal is parents resenting a child for existing. My father stood up, his patience visibly exhausted. This conversation is pointless. The fact remains that Abigail's wedding day should be perfect and your presence would create tension. The greatest gift you can give your sister is to disappear from our family. Forever. The word forever echoed in the dining room. Not just the wedding then. They wanted me gone permanently. Something inside me that had been stretched to its breaking point for decades finally snapped. Not in anger or hysteria, but in a strange calm clarity. I looked at these two people, my biological parents, and realized they were strangers to me. They always had been. Okay, I said simply. My response clearly surprised them. Perhaps they had expected tears, pleading a scene that would confirm their narrative about my dramatic tendencies. Okay, my mother repeated suspiciously. Yes. You have made your position clear. I will not attend the wedding. I will not contact Abigail. And I will not be part of this family anymore. Without waiting for their response, I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom. It had been converted to a home office years ago, but a few boxes of my belongings remained in the closet. I retrieved them silently, feeling nothing, as I gathered yearbooks, childhood awards, and the few mementos that had been deemed worthy of storage. My parents watched from the doorway, seemingly uncertain how to respond to my quiet compliance. I passed them without another word and walked to the kitchen drawer where the spare keys were kept. I removed my copy of their house key and placed it on the counter. "Kennedy," my mother called as I headed for the front door, my boxes balanced in my arms. Her voice held a note of uncertainty, as if my calm acceptance had disrupted her expected script. I turned back one last time. "Yes." She seemed to struggle for words, then simply said, "Close the door properly when you leave." I nodded and walked out the door, clicking shut behind me like a final punctuation mark. I placed the boxes in my trunk, got into the driver's seat, and sat perfectly still for several minutes. I expected tears, but none came. Instead, a strange numbness spread through me, protective and insulating. As I drove home, my mind shifted from the emotional devastation to practical considerations. My apartment that my parents co-owned. The family emergency account to which I was the primary contributor. The various ways we remained financially entangled, despite the emotional chasm between us. Instead of spending the night crying, I opened my laptop and began researching my legal options. If they wanted me gone from the family, they would get their wish more completely than they had anticipated. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, Janet, knowing my perfect attendance record, did not question it. "Take care of yourself, Kennedy. Your projects can wait a day." Derek came over before heading to his office, concern etched on his face. He found me at my dining table, surrounded by printouts and notes, my laptop open to a legal website. "You look," he began, then paused, seemingly unable to find the right word. "Focused," I suggested. I was going to say scarily calm. "How are you really doing?" I considered the question seriously. I honestly do not know. I feel like I should be devastated, and part of me is. But another part feels liberated. Like I have been trying to win an unwinnable game my whole life, and now I can finally stop playing. He sat beside me, scanning the papers spread across the table. "What are all these?" "Research. I need to disentangle myself from my family legally and financially." I pointed to different stacks. Apartment co-ownership documents. Joint account statements. Legal precedents for similar situations. "You are rebuilding your entire life," he observed. "I have to," I replied. "They want me gone. I am just being thorough about it." Derek's expression shifted from concern to determination. "Okay. What can I do to help? Can you come with me to meet a lawyer this afternoon?" I made an appointment with Sandra Wilson. She specializes in family and property law. Of course, he agreed immediately. "And what about after all this? Have you thought about what you want next?" I had been so focused on the immediate steps that his question caught me off guard. "I need distance," I realized. Physical distance. I cannot stay in Boston with them nearby, knowing they might be talking about me to friends and family, spreading their narrative. Derek nodded thoughtfully. "What about Seattle? Your company has an office there, right? And I could look for positions too." The suggestion of Seattle planted a seed that would grow stronger throughout the day. A fresh start 3,000 miles away from the family that never wanted me. At 2 o'clock, Derek and I sat in attorney Sandra Wilson's office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a reputation for tough but fair negotiations. "Let me understand the situation," she said after I had explained the basics. "You co-own your apartment with your parents, though you have made all the mortgage payments. You also maintain a joint emergency account with them and your sister, to which you contribute the majority of funds." "That is correct," I confirmed. "And now, due to family estrangement, you wish to cleanly separate these entanglements." "Yes, as quickly and completely as possible." She studied the documents I had brought. "The apartment situation actually works in your favor. As a co-owner who has made all payments, you have the right to sell the property. They would be entitled to a portion of the proceeds, but given that they have contributed nothing, we can make a strong case for minimizing that amount." "I do not care about the money," I said. "I just want a clean break." "As for the joint account," she continued, "you have the right to withdraw your contributions and freeze the account." I would recommend doing so immediately before they attempt to empty it. By the time we left the lawyer's office, I had a clear action plan. First step, contact a real estate agent to list my apartment. Second, freeze the joint account. Third, inquire about a transfer to my company's Seattle office. The next morning, I met with Brian Miller, a real estate agent recommended by Sandra. He walked through my apartment making appreciative comments about the hardwood floors and updated kitchen. The market is hot right now, he assured me. I can list this today, and we will likely have offers by the weekend. How quickly could we close? I asked. With motivated buyers and sellers, 3 to 4 weeks at minimum, possibly faster if they can pay cash. Next, I visited my bank and spoke with the manager about the joint account situation. After reviewing the documentation Sandra had prepared, they agreed to freeze the account pending resolution of the ownership dispute. Given the evidence of your contributions, the manager explained we can prevent withdrawals until this is legally settled. Back at home, I called my company's human resources department to inquire about transfer possibilities. We do have several open positions in the Seattle office, Miranda from HR confirmed. With your seniority and performance record, I cannot imagine there would be any issues with a transfer request. Would you like me to begin that process? Yes, please, I said, feeling a weight lift with each decisive action. The practical tasks kept me focused, preventing me from dwelling on the emotional wounds still raw beneath the surface. In between appointments, I began sorting through my belongings, separating what was essential from what could be left behind. I found myself lingering over photos and mementos, a family vacation to Cape Cod when I was 10. One of the rare times I remembered feeling included. A science fair ribbon my father had actually seemed proud of. Abigail's hand-drawn birthday card from when she was 7, before the distance between us had grown so vast. That evening, Derek helped me continue sorting and packing. He picked up a journal from my high school years, raising an eyebrow in question. You can read it, I said. I doubt it contains anything surprising now. He opened to a random page and read silently, his expression growing troubled. Kennedy listened to this entry. Mom forgot to pick me up from debate practice again. When I walked home in the rain, she said she thought Abigail had a doctor's appointment today. Abigail was at the mall with friends. They all laughed about Mom's bad memory, but this is the 3rd time this month. I remembered that day, the chill of April rain, soaking through my jacket, the sound of my family's laughter as I stood dripping in the entryway. At the time, I had accepted it as normal. Now, with adult perspective, I recognized it as neglect. There are dozens of entries like this, Derek said, flipping through pages. Small incidents that add up to a pattern. I know, I replied quietly. I always made excuses for them. Always believed if I just achieved more, behaved better, needed less, they would finally love me the way they loved Abigail. That was never going to happen, Derek said gently. And that is on them, not you. His words loosened something in my chest, and for the first time since the restaurant conversation, I allowed myself to cry. Not the desperate tears of someone begging to be loved, but the grieving tears of someone finally accepting a painful truth. Later that week, I had my first appointment with Dr. Marcia Fernandez, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Her office was warm and inviting with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. What brings you here today, Kennedy? She asked after the initial paperwork was complete. I recently discovered that my parents never wanted me to exist. I said, the bluntness of my statement surprising even me. And I am trying to figure out how to exist anyway. Dr. Fernandez did not flinch at my directness. That is a profound wound to process. Where would you like to begin? With practical steps, I said. I am selling my apartment, transferring jobs, moving across the country. I need to make sure I am thinking clearly through these decisions. Often, when we experience emotional trauma, focusing on practical actions can be stabilizing, she observed. But we also need to make space for the feelings underneath. I will get to those, I promised, but right now, the doing is helping me survive the feeling. She nodded, understanding. Just be aware that postponing emotional processing does not mean those emotions disappear. I know, I acknowledged. They are waiting for me. But right now, I need to rebuild my external foundations before I can safely explore the internal damage. As the week progressed, my apartment listing went live. As Brian predicted, offers came in almost immediately, several above asking price. I accepted one from a young couple who could close in 3 weeks, contingent on inspection and financing. The joint account remained frozen, despite multiple angry calls from my parents that I let go to voicemail. Sandra assured me that legally my position was strong given the documentation of my contributions. My transfer request to Seattle was approved with surprising speed. Your manager Thomas spoke highly of your work and supported the transfer immediately, Miranda from HR told me. The Seattle office is excited to have you join them next month. Each step forward made my path clearer. Each decision reinforced my sense of agency. For perhaps the first time in my life, I was making choices based solely on what I needed, not on seeking approval that would never come. Derek secured several promising job interviews with Seattle tech firms, his specialized skills in high demand. We could find an apartment in Capitol Hill, he suggested one evening as we researched Seattle neighborhoods. Or maybe Queen Anne for the views. Planning a new life together in a new city brought moments of genuine excitement amidst the pain of separation from my family. I began to envision what life could be like without the constant undercurrent of rejection and comparison. The freedom to define myself outside the narrative my family had constructed about me. With each passing day, my apartment became less like a home and more like a transitional space. Boxes lined the walls. Furniture was sold or donated. The life I had built in Boston was being systematically dismantled, making way for something new. 3 days after accepting the offer on my apartment, my phone lit up with my father's number for the 6th time that week. Unlike the previous calls, I decided to answer. "Kennedy," he barked without greeting. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" "Hello, Father," I replied calmly. "I assume you are calling about either the apartment or the bank account." "Both," he shouted. "Your mother went to withdraw funds for Abigail's wedding flowers and found the account frozen. Then we received notification that our apartment is being sold. Have you lost your mind?" "I am doing exactly what you asked." I explained, my voice steady, disappearing from the family, completely. "That does not mean stealing our money and selling our property." "I am not stealing anything. The account records clearly show I contributed 70% of those funds. As for the apartment, I have made every mortgage payment despite your co-ownership. My lawyer assures me that the division of proceeds will be fair." There was a moment of stunned silence before he spoke again, his voice lower but more dangerous. "We will fight this legally. You cannot just destroy family relationships and expect no consequences." "You destroyed our relationship when you told me I was never wanted," I replied. "I am simply handling the aftermath in a way that protects me." After that conversation, the threats escalated. My mother left voicemails promising legal action. Abigail sent tearful messages accusing me of deliberately ruining her wedding. Their lawyer contacted Sandra, who calmly presented the documentation of my contributions and ownership rights, effectively neutralizing their claims. They have no legal standing to prevent the apartment sale. Sandra assured me after one particularly heated exchange, "And the bank has verified your contributions to the joint account. They are making noise because they are surprised by your backbone." The reactions from extended family were mixed. Most took my parents' side without question, sending messages expressing their disappointment in my selfish behavior and jealousy toward Abigail. A few remained silent, neither condemning nor supporting me. And one, my Uncle William, my father's younger brother, reached out with unexpected understanding. "Kennedy," he said when I answered his call, "I want you to know that I see what is happening. I have watched how they treated you compared to Abigail for years." His acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." "Thomas has always been hard," Uncle William continued. "But what they are doing to you goes beyond that. I want you to know that not everyone in the family believes their version of events." His support, though it could not heal the primary wound, was a balm on the secondary injuries inflicted by the wider family's rejection. As my departure from Boston approached, practical matters consumed my days. The apartment closing was scheduled. My Seattle transfer paperwork was complete. Derek had secured a position with a Seattle-based tech company that actually offered better advancement opportunities than his current role. "Maybe this forced change will turn out to be the best thing that could have happened to us," he suggested one night as we finalized our moving arrangements. Maybe I agreed, though. The pain was still too fresh to fully embrace that perspective. My sessions with Dr. Fernandez continued providing a safe space to begin processing the emotional devastation beneath my productive exterior. "Family rejection strikes at our core sense of identity and belonging," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "The child inside you is still asking what she did wrong, even as the adult understands it was never your fault." "How do I help that child?" I asked. "By giving her what your parents never did: acceptance, love, permission to exist exactly as she is." The lessons were difficult but essential as I prepared to build a new life separated from the family narrative that had defined me for 30 years. 2 days before our scheduled move, I received a text from cousin Grace. "Abigail's wedding was yesterday. Small ceremony at the country club. Everyone asking where you were. Your parents telling people you threatened them and tried to ruin the wedding. Thought you should know the stories being spread." Though the news of the wedding passing without me stung, I was surprised to find it did not devastate me as it might have earlier. "Thank you for telling me," I replied to Grace. I hope Abigail was happy with her day. Despite everything, I had sent a generous gift certificate to a high-end home goods store 2 weeks earlier, addressed only to Abigail and Jason. No note, no expectations. A final gesture toward the sister relationship I had always wanted, but never truly had. She never acknowledged receiving it. The apartment closing proceeded smoothly. After legal fees and the minimal settlement to my parents, I had enough funds to establish ourselves comfortably in Seattle. The joint account dispute was resolved in my favor, the bank releasing the funds to me once the legal documentation was reviewed. On our last night in Boston, Derek and I stayed in a hotel, my apartment keys already handed over to the new owners. We shared a bottle of wine and looked out at the city skyline, the familiar view soon to be replaced by the mountains and waters of the Pacific Northwest. "Are you having second thoughts?" Derek asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "Not second thoughts," I clarified. "Just awareness. 30 years of history in this city. 3,000 miles is a long way to go. We can always come back to visit friends," he reminded me. "This does not have to be forever if you change your mind." "I know," I said. "But right now, forever feels exactly right." Our arrival in Seattle coincided with a rare sunny day in March. The mountains were visible in the distance, the waters of Puget Sound glittering in the spring light. Our temporary corporate housing in South Lake Union offered views of the Space Needle, a constant reminder that we were truly in a new place. My first day at the Seattle office was a whirlwind of introductions and orientations. My new team seemed genuinely excited to have me, several mentioning projects of mine they had admired from afar. For the first time in my career, I found myself in an environment where my achievements were celebrated, without the shadow of family comparisons dampening the joy. Derek similarly thrived in his new position, coming home each evening with stories of challenging problems and collaborative solutions. We began exploring our new city on weekends, discovering favorite restaurants, hiking trails, and coffee shops. Slowly, we built routines that had no connection to my past life. We found a 2-bedroom apartment in Queen Anne with a view of the bay, signing a lease that had only our names on it. I insisted on purchasing all new furniture, rather than bringing anything from the Boston apartment, wanting a truly fresh start. "Is this what normal feels like?" I asked Derek one evening as we shared takeout on our new balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Making decisions without considering how they will be judged. Enjoying achievements without waiting for them to be diminished. Just existing without constantly seeking approval." He reached for my hand. "Yes, I think that is exactly what normal is supposed to feel like." 3 months after our move, Derek proposed during a ferry ride to Bainbridge Island. No elaborate production, just a quiet moment as we stood at the railing watching Seattle recede behind us. "I want to build a family with you," he said, "one that heals rather than hurts." Our engagement celebration was small, a dinner with new friends from work, no family present. Yet it felt more genuine than any family gathering I could remember. These people chose to celebrate with us because they genuinely cared, not out of obligation or appearance. In my weekly video sessions with Dr. Fernandez, now conducted remotely, I continued working through the complex emotions surrounding my family estrangement. I still have moments where I check my phone expecting to see a message from them, I admitted during one session. Some part of me still wants them to realize what they lost. That is natural, she assured me. Acceptance does not mean the absence of grief. It means making space for that grief while still moving forward. Moving forward included deleting my social media accounts and creating new ones, disconnecting from the extended family network that had been a source of surveillance and judgment. The freedom of no longer monitoring family posts or worrying about what was being said about me was surprisingly liberating. 6 months after our move, I received an unexpected letter from Abigail, forwarded through my old company address in Boston. The envelope sat unopened on our kitchen counter for 3 days before I found the courage to read it. Kennedy, she had written in her flowing script, I am writing because I cannot stop thinking about what happened before my wedding. I was caught up in wedding stress and family dynamics that I did not fully understand. Since then, I have learned things about how Mom and Dad talked about you to me and about me to you that have made me question many things I believed were true. I cannot say I understand everything yet, but I wanted to acknowledge that you were hurt and I played a role in that. Jason and I are in couples therapy, and it has opened my eyes to some unhealthy patterns I brought from our family. I do not expect a response. I just wanted you to know that not everything is as black and white as it seemed 6 months ago. The letter offered no direct apology, no request for reconciliation. Yet it represented the first crack in the solid wall of family narrative that had been built against me. I showed it to Dr. Fernandez during our next session. What do you want to do with this? She asked after reading it. Nothing for now, I decided. I am not ready to respond. I need to focus on my healing before I can consider any form of contact, even through letters. That is a healthy boundary, she affirmed. Healing happens on your timeline, not according to others' readiness or desires. That fall, I joined a support group for adults experiencing family estrangement. The stories shared in that circle, the pain, the doubt, the guilt, and ultimately the steps toward healing, resonated deeply with my experience. By winter, I had been asked to help facilitate the group, my own journey serving as both caution and encouragement to others just beginning theirs. 1 year after leaving Boston, Derek and I stood beneath a flower-adorned arbor in a small garden overlooking Puget Sound, exchanging vows surrounded by our chosen family. No parents in the front row, no childhood friends as attendants, yet the ceremony felt complete. My colleagues from work, Derek's new friends from his company, our neighbors, and the members of my support group filled the seats, their genuine joy palpable. Uncle William had flown in from Boston, the only blood relative present. You look happy, Kennedy, he said during the reception. Truly happy, maybe for the first time since you were a little girl. My promotion to team lead had come through the previous month, my work consistently recognized and valued in the Seattle office. The persistent fear that I was only promoted in Boston to spite Abigail faded, as my contributions were acknowledged, based solely on their merit. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of my healing journey. The wounds inflicted in childhood do not disappear entirely, Dr. Fernandez reminded me. But we can learn to carry them differently with compassion rather than shame. The support group I helped facilitate grew, creating a community of understanding for those walking similar paths. Family estrangement is more common than people realize, I often told newcomers. And sometimes it is the healthiest choice available. Spring brought another letter from Abigail, this one more direct in its acknowledgments. I have been doing individual therapy, she wrote, unpacking the ways Mom and Dad pitted us against each other. I remember now how you tried to connect with me many times over the years, and how I was conditioned to see those attempts as threats or manipulation. I am sorry, Kennedy. Truly sorry for my part in hurting you. This time, after sitting with the letter for several weeks, I sent a brief reply. No commitments, no forgiveness yet offered, but an acknowledgement of her effort and a short update on my new life. A small opening, carefully bounded. The grief of family loss never fully disappeared. Some days a song on the radio or a holiday advertisement featuring happy families could still trigger waves of sadness. But these moments no longer derailed me. I had learned to sit with the grief, honor it then, continue building the life I deserved. The greatest lesson I shared with my support group one evening has been realizing that blood does not define family. Family is about consistent love, respect, and acceptance. Sometimes the family that truly sees and values us is the one we create, not the one we were born into. This perspective transformed how I approached relationships of all kinds. I became more discerning about who I allowed into my inner circle, prioritizing authenticity over longevity, genuine connection over obligation. The chosen family that gathered around Derek and me proved that meaningful bonds could be formed at any stage of life. My parents never contacted me directly after those initial angry calls about the apartment and bank account. Through Uncle William, I occasionally heard fragments of their lives, the stories they told to explain my absence, their continued favoritism toward Abigail, their apparent inability to recognize their role in the family fracture. "Do you think they will ever acknowledge what they did?" Derek asked after one such update from Uncle William. "No," I replied with surprising peace. "They would have to confront too many uncomfortable truths about themselves, but I no longer need their acknowledgement to move forward." This was perhaps the most profound shift in my healing forgiveness without reconciliation. Understanding that I could release the anger and resentment that bound me to them without requiring their participation in that process. That I could wish them well from a distance while maintaining the boundaries that protected my hard-won peace. 2 years after leaving Boston, I found myself driving along the Pacific coast on a rare day off windows, down the scent of salt water filling the car. In that moment, I was struck by the realization that I had gone an entire day without thinking about my family of origin. No checking for messages, no replaying old hurts, no imagining confrontations or reconciliations. Just presence in my current life, appreciation for the beauty around me, anticipation of returning home to Derek. "You set me free," I whispered to the absent figures of my parents, the words carried away by the wind. "In trying to erase me, you actually released me to become fully myself." That evening, I added a final entry to the journal I had been keeping since leaving Boston. "The child who was never supposed to be born has built a life worth living. The daughter who was never wanted has become a woman who wants herself, values herself, defends herself. The sister who was cast as the villain in someone else's story is now writing her own. And in this story, the abandoned one finds her home not in the approval of others, but in the quiet certainty of her own worth." The journey from rejection to self-acceptance is rarely linear. There are still days when the echoes of my parents' words try to convince me of my unworthiness. Moments when the absence of family support during milestone events stings sharply. But these instances grow less frequent, less powerful. What remains constant is the knowledge that walking away from toxicity, however painful, creates space for healing and growth. That sometimes the greatest act of self-love is refusing to remain where you are not valued. That family can be chosen, created, nurtured through intention, rather than biology. If you have ever felt like the unwanted one, the scapegoat, the family member who never quite fits, know that you are not alone. Your worth is not determined by those who failed to see it. Your story does not end with rejection. Where are you in your journey of healing from family wounds? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about family dynamics, healing, and building a life on your own terms. Remember, sometimes the family we create brings more healing than the family we were born into. Thank you for being part of my chosen family today, and I wish you peace on your own path to wholeness.